Hi boys and girls, so today is March 20 and it's 2020, it's Friday, and today I'm gonna read to you talking about forces. I said I was gonna read this to you in the last science video in the PowerPoint that you saw, and we're gonna read it, okay? So follow along. Talking about forces. It was a beautiful day at the park. Everywhere you looked, there was kids making things move. We have many ways of talking about what happens when one thing makes another thing move. Scientists and engineers have their own way of explaining what is happening. They look about forces. They say that when one thing makes another thing move, it exerts a force on it. Let's see some examples. Scott pushed Frances on the swing and Frances moved. She sailed forward in the swing high into the air. What would a scientist or an engineer say would happen here? Here's what a scientist or an engineer would say. Frances moved because Scott exerted a force on her. Fafi jumped into the wagon and asked for a ride. Frances pulled on the handle of the wagon, and the wagon rolled up with the hill with Fafi in it. What would a scientist or an engineer say would happen here? Let's go back to the next page. Here's what a scientist would say. The wagon and Fafi moved because Frances exerted a force on the wagon. Mia and Scott played catch in the field. When it was her turn to throw, Mia threw the ball and it flew away from her. What would a scientist or an engineer say would happen here? Here's what an engineer or a scientist would say. The ball moved because Mia exerted force on the ball. Another ball was sitting on the grass. Jess ran up and kicked the ball. Wham! The ball bounced away over the grass. Jess scored a goal. What would a scientist or an engineer say would happen here? They will say that the ball moved because Jess exerted a force on the ball. The kids had fun playing in the park and making things move. A scientist or an engineer would agree that they had fun playing in the park. A scientist or an engineer might also say they exerted forces on lots of objects in the park. Scientists and engineers know that anytime you see an object start to move, it is because another object exerted a force on it. When you see one object start to move, look for the other objects that made it move. Forces always happen between two objects. Now, here are more examples of pictures of objects exerting force on others. Now, this is a snow plow shoved the snow and the snow moved forward along the road. The grandma pushed the grandpa's chair and the chair rolled along the sidewalk. The hammer pounced the nail and the nail moved down into the wood. The bird tugged on the worm and the worm slid up out of the sand. The dog dragged the sled and the sled slipped across the snow. What is another way to say what happened in these pictures? How would a scientist or an engineer say it? Look at each picture and think about these questions. What object moved? What object exerted a force on it, making it move? Okay, boys and girls. So for your lesson, I already mentioned it on the teams, and there was an assignment, but I accidentally put it with the ELA, but I'm gonna move it in science. What you have to do is, you saw examples at the end of the book of them doing different examples of exerting force on an object. So what I want you to do is at home, Find an object that you exert force on. For example, when you're brushing your teeth, moving a chair, kicking a ball, anything that you exert force on at home, I want you to either draw it or talk about it, okay? I will put this PowerPoint, this video in the team so you can see. Also, I will also show you the assignment for you to do. So something similar to this, like they show you many examples of exerting force, how the bird was tugging on the worm, like pulling it up, the hammer was hitting the nail, the dog moving the sled, the truck moving the snow, the grandma pushing the grandpa on the wheelchair, so stuff like that. So I want to see examples of you exerting force on objects at home. Okay, so that's what you have to do, and then when you're done, you can take a picture of it, email it to me, or you can talk about it. Okay, so have your parents or an older sibling help you. So okay, have a nice day.